Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for, this is our last developer user group meetup for this year. Yeah, welcome. And yeah, today we've got two very good speakers. I think they're good. I hope they're good. First, we've got André. Oh, no, yes, André. Yeah, André is going to be telling us a little bit about.
Didn't we say we're swapping it around?
Thought we were swapping them around as
we're
well.
swapping them around.
Yes,
okay,
please.
Cool. All right, we're going to have Neil first then. Neil is going to be telling us about how to break down a monolith. Yeah, that's a very meaty description that he's got there. I'll let him explain everything about that. Yeah, and I think all of us have been there at some point in our careers if you've been working for long enough. And we've also got André coming after Neil. He's going to be telling us about how to, I think, how the perfect CV should look, how to make your portfolio look good, stand out in interviews. Basically, after you come back from your holidays and you're tired of your old job, it's going to tell you how to make yourself look good for the new one. Yeah, so just a quick reminder, we've got the Geek of the Year on the 9th of December. I think that's in 3 weeks' time. Will be totally online, open to everybody, and there will be prizes. Prizes, unfortunately, only for people living in South Africa, and will be delivered to you in our lockdown-friendly way. Yeah, so have a look at the meetup page. I'll just paste the link of in the chat window. And yeah, take it away, Neil. You can go ahead.
Okay, let's share. Okay. Can everyone see that? Okay, good. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to talk the meaty description is basically just about modernization, a bit of how to take your application from running as a big monolith up into a cloud, breaking out the services, and what kind of things you would adopt. I'm going to sort of touch on a few concepts, a few architectures. It should hopefully be an interesting topic. And this talk actually came about a while back when someone asked me, one of my clients asked me if I could do some AWS stuff. And I told him, well, I don't know AWS at all. And I went off and started studying and looking at AWS and all their freaking TLAs. AWS is built on TLAs, I can tell you that much. And it became a bit overwhelming. So what I decided to do is actually take a step back and look at a sort of a standard commerce type application and break it down, into services that I would use in Azure, because I know a bit about Azure, and then sort of how does that map onto AWS. And this was an interesting discussion, journey for me, and this is basically a summary of a few weeks of my life. And yeah, I might take it a bit further and talk about cloud-specific technologies or tools, or non-cloud specific technologies and tools, but we'll see. So as Ezra started there, my name is Neil. Officially, my wife calls me a DevOps solution architect, and I run a business in doing DevOps consulting around DevOps, developer practices, architecture, that kind of stuff. And I keep myself busy with interesting technologies and bits and pieces. So a bit more about what we're doing today. We've got this monolith. Okay, so it's a classic e-commerce type site. It's a web application, got a bunch of pages. It's got some user profile management, which is custom built, for people to log in, track orders, that kind of stuff. Basically, to see the history of what the person is ordering and sort of what they've got in their baskets, that kind of stuff. Then we've got a cart follows through to a payment process where it connects to a third-party payment gateway. Orders are submitted, concluded, confirmations are sent, and then the order is sent to a warehouse where ultimately, hopefully, it gets fulfilled relatively shortly. All the information is stored in a database, and it is basically hosted on IIS, on a physical machine or a VM, and it sits behind a firewall. Now, when we look at this is a big application or a monolith, and we could probably make the argument that it's actually falls into the legacy category. And why do I say that? Well, it works, okay? We've been there, it's been doing what it needed to do for quite a while. There hasn't been any major updates in the last couple of years, so it's sort of been, like I said, just cruising along. And it's probably built on the good old-fashioned 2 or 3-tier architecture, right? So the other side of this is JB Rainsberger from JetBrains. He said that one of the definitions of legacy is it's profitable code that we feel afraid to change, right? So with its age, it's becoming difficult to make changes, and there's a couple of reasons for that. So technical debt obviously accumulates over time. Skills and the knowledge of the people working on this application, they sort of move on, they get diluted by going on to different projects, different teams, different companies. So you sort of end up with something like this. And this basically, as time goes on, it becomes more expensive. It takes more time to make fixes, to fix issues, bugs, not to speak of new functionality. So it almost becomes, the benefits of not making the changes or fixes outweigh this of actually doing it. You can go ahead and do it, but there's going to be great cost and it's going to take time and that kind of stuff. So errors are popping up. They're difficult to track down. You know the old adage, fix something in one area and something in another area breaks, that kind of stuff. There'll be few automated tests, if any. It's starting to slow down because obviously the database, when it was designed, wasn't designed to cater for vast amounts of data and the history that's accumulated over the years. It becomes expensive to scale up, incurring downtime because obviously you need to switch machines off to up memory and hardware, and also to scale out. So it's a lot of effort involved, and it becomes expensive to provision new hardware, boot up new VMs, to install the correct software, everything like that. Third-party integrations, those companies are changing, they're still updating, but it's getting difficult for us to keep track and to actually maintain parity with what the companies are looking for. If you're thinking about all the changes with regards to security and that kind of stuff. So it becomes cumbersome to make those updates. Not to speak of those companies potentially outpricing themselves, but we can't change. So we're stuck, vendor lock-in and all that kind of good stuff. From a security point of view, this monolith has pretty much a single attack surface. So once you're in, you've got access to pretty much everything that you need. And it's just not that cool. And as funny as that might sound, it is very difficult to attract new developers, new people with old technology. Okay. So what can we do? And some of the things that I want to make you aware of is this sort of a journey of modernization and what a modern application might look like. So there's a lot of buzzwords flying around, but I think that the foundations of a modern application should include some concepts. And these are things like microservices. So small domains that are manageable. You can make a change in one aspect or one area and deploy it with relative ease without impacting the entire system. And to a couple of my clients, if you have to deploy the entire system to make a change in one service, that's not a microservice-based architecture. Won't name any names, but containers. The containerization is actually quite a neat way to enforce the sort of microservice boundaries. And it provides a mechanism to transport these services or applications or processes in sort of a non-mutable fashion, okay? So this makes it testable as a unit, and it also reduces the attack surface or the security surfaces, which is quite neat. Cloud, of course, the fact is that managing data centers is becoming expensive, outdated. We always fight against capacity problems when we're busy working with our own data centers. And having our own data centers just does not give us the agility to test hypotheses, to access required resources that we didn't think we needed last week, okay? It doesn't give us the ability to sort of scale on demand, scale up and then down again. And like I said, consume the services, consume new applications, new infrastructures, new environments, sort of at a click of a button. Then, I'm talking about sort of infrastructure kind of concepts here, but why do we care about infrastructure? I mean, I want to abstract as much of this away from me. This whole idea of serverless fits in very nice with microservices concepts. So little pieces of functionality that we could make together, it builds up a whole, okay? It's available individually, but also can scale at a drop of a coin. Then leveraging things like machine learning and AI. We want to make informed decisions at unimaginable scale and speed, okay? These days, everything is about data. If you know that old adage, if you do not know what the product is, it is probably you, right? But having all of this data doesn't mean anything unless you aren't doing something with it. So using machine learning, using AI, we train our models and we can train them to quickly and efficiently look over this vast amount of data to find stuff like potentially fraudulent transactions, fake news, user buying patterns, diseased crops on farms. We can even just respond to sort of the repetitive questions and queries in our call centers. And all of this basically gives us the ability to focus on what we need to and then let all of this take care of the fluff, the 80% of the stuff. Then we should be making the bulk of all of this mundane stuff, the services, someone else's problem. We, as I just said, we need to focus on the stuff that is important, stuff that makes us stand out. We want to differentiate ourselves from the competitors out there. I mean, why would a call center care about wiring up a PIBX system? Or a financial house care about spinning up a Kubernetes cluster or OpenShift server in their data center? I mean, that's just ridiculous. You want to focus on your core. All of this, of course, feeds into this ability to, as I said, allow us to focus on those differentiating factors. We want to make these changes. We want to make them quickly and efficiently. We want to get those changes out into production as soon as possible. We can and should automate as much of stuff as possible, to get these critical bug fixes into production in a matter of hours, not weeks, or to get that new feature that will make us stand out even further from our competitors out in a fraction of the time that it would have normally. After all, if you aren't doing this, then your competitor probably is. Yeah. Okay, so with this sort of an overview and looking at these concepts, let's start getting a bit more opinionated. So I'm going to talk about how I'm going to take this guy and break it up into smaller chunks or smaller manageable chunks. And I'm going to sort of describe the technologies that I've come across in the cloud sphere potentially, and where they would make sense to be used or incorporated. As I said, this is fairly opinionated, so there's probably better ways of doing it. But let's carry on. First step, I'm going to focus in on the actual application itself. And I want to draw out the contextual boundaries. Now, if you have been around for a few decades, as I have, you've probably read a book by Eric Evans called Domain-Driven Design. More importantly, he talks about bounded contexts in there. And this sort of feeds into this whole microservices mindset. So we can break it up into sort of bounded contexts. Now, at this stage, we can probably just containerize it and run it in Kubernetes and call it a day. But I think I've still got a few minutes left in my talk that I need to fill. So I'm interested in reducing my workload, the amount of work that I need to put into this to make it run and work. I want to leverage what I can from wherever I can. Firstly, authentication. Authentication's always been a pain. Your username, password management, when you start talking about encryption, MFA, all that kind of stuff, it gets annoyed, especially if you've churned out your own system to handle that. I want to use a system. So instead of having my own developed system, which potentially is not as secure as you think it might be, I want to use the social accounts, which everyone seems to be using these days. I still want to store some application information, but I want the authentication to be handled by someone else. And luckily for me, there's two systems. Well, in Azure, we've got the B2C system or B2C, and in AWS, we've got Cognito services. And these actually provide the framework for us. So we can literally just leverage those things, set up registrations, and let it handle everything for us. So your multi-factor authentication, all that kind of stuff, the encryption, the security is handled by them. And we can just integrate it into our system. We'll still store some of the information in our application, but I think the hard work and the safety and security concerns is done somewhere else and handled by someone else. Next up is the glossies and the static pages, the overviews, the information, the contact, that kind of stuff. This is currently being stored as part of the web application, but I want to separate them because, well, I can. And a cheap and easy way of hosting static pages, even single page applications, would be your blob storage or your S3 storage. These are quick, easy, cheap. I could go and set up a web app or Elastic Beanstalk for this, sure, but I think this gives you a better overview of the different services and how you would use them. And besides, I'll be looking at the web app and the Beanstalk right about now. So next up is the catalog, and I'm going to draw this out a bit. The catalog at the moment shows us a list of items for sale. It has some basic search capability. yeah, I'll get to that a bit later. And it also, so it gives us a list of the items that we'll take and put into our cart, and then obviously, hopefully go and check out. So like I said, I'm going to draw this out a bit. And firstly, I'm going to actually host the web in a app service. So AWS has the Beanstalk, Elastic Beanstalk, and Azure has app services. And both of these services you can actually containerize. So cool, we can actually in future, or now if you wanted to, you can package your applications in a container and then manage that and publish that into these services. Great. I want to store the catalog information in a read optimized storage. So the good old fashioned relational database should fit into this area. You've got your AWS RDS and Azure SQL that will perform that task quite adequately. Then we also have our images and our PDFs and our big binary files. And to store that in a relational database is going to be way too expensive. So we want to take that out. And as I mentioned earlier, cheap, easy storage, S3, blob storage, dump them in there, reference them directly, happiness. Then the next step is we also want to reduce the load on those databases. And to do that, we want to not have millions of hits against those databases, so we can start looking at caching. And we can cache these catalogs, the search results, and that kind of stuff in services such as your Azure Redis cache or your AWS Elastic cache. Next up, the search, as I mentioned earlier. Now, currently, we've just got a very simple where description-like type of search. And when I did this, when I sort of started out setting up this presentation, I was looking for a very specific item. Well, not very specific, but a specific item. And I used Take-A-Lot and Loot. And Take-A-Lot actually took me to that item on the first page, and I think it was like the third one from the top. Loot, I couldn't find it. No matter how I would change that query, how I would change it. And eventually, after literally browsing pages upon pages upon pages of products, I found they actually did sell that same item. So that to me is sort of the make and break of clients. If you can't find stuff, how do you propose people buy stuff, right? So we want to improve the search capability. We want better performance. We want predictive searching. And why not go for the full Monty and just say add multilingual capability as well? So for us, luckily, there's a few options. And in AWS, we've got Elasticsearch and Cloud Search. Now, Elasticsearch is obviously built on Elasticsearch, which is an open source initiative. The problem is in AWS, well, for me at least, it was pretty a pain to set it up and manage it. So I'll just stick to something like Amazon Cloud Search for this, which is for me a better solution to get up and going quickly. And on Azure side, there's the cognitive search, which all checks those boxes for me. And then because we understand that a stable application is one with an absence of errors, okay? But by the time that there's the service becomes unstable, there's already issues and things that have started failing, okay? So we want to proactively monitor what is going on in all these services, in all these applications. And I want to know things like, how's the service being used? What are the bottlenecks? And how's the consumption growing? Which areas are taking the brunt of the traffic as opposed to others? And once again, luckily for us, both services has got pretty decent monitoring services for us. So on AWS, we've got Cloud Watch, and in Azure, we've got Application Insights. And these things can even let us notify us when errors start occurring or when we get close to usage limits and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of insight to be gained around that. Okay, so that is the catalog. Next up is the cart and some of the aspects around that. Now, as you can see, this is pretty much going to be the same sort of approach or a structure as with the catalog, but I'm going to mix it up a bit. So firstly, I'm going to use a NoSQL database for the logging what items for the order processing and that kind of stuff. And here's a couple of options on both services actually. AWS has DocumentDB and DynamoDB. In Azure, we've got table storage and obviously Cosmos DB. Now, in both these scenarios, it's up to you to pretty much spike which one would fit your business case scenario, what kind of things you are looking for out of these services. Yeah, I've just got Cosmos because, well, that's the cool kid on the block, and DynamoDB because, well, that's the easier one for me. And it's been around longer and supports different languages as well. Then once the order's been completed, I want to send an instruction to the warehouse. Now, I want to decouple this processing on that side from the application itself. It's almost like a send and forget type of scenario. And for this, we've got a few options once again. So in AWS, we've got SQS and SNS. See, I wasn't joking about those TLAs. There's Service Bus, Event Grid, Queue Storage on Azure. And all these services, they bring stuff like pub sub, routing, guarantee delivery, and all that kind of wonderful stuff. So once again, this is not even talking about services such as RabbitMQ, Kafka, and those kind of services. So I think for our cloud journey, I'm just going to keep it simple. Simple queue service in AWS and Azure Queue Storage would more than suffice for our purposes. Okay, next up is, as I mentioned, that part of the checkout we want to integrate to a payment gateway. Now, once again, there's quite a few payment gateways out there, and I don't know if anyone has actually worked with them, but they can be fairly brittle and they do change quite often. So we want to abstract that sort of away behind a function so that we can easily process millions of payments, Luckily for us, once again, AWS, Lambda, and Azure functions will fit in nicely here as a level of abstractions. These are small specific routines that can get updated with relative ease. You can sort of think about a single responsibility principle if you want to talk about solid principles. Okay, so that's sort of the checkout process. And after, the next step is to inform the warehouse that there's actually an order that they need to fulfill. They need to go and pick it, ship it, and then of course inform us and the clients or the shoppers with the courier details and delivery. As I mentioned, as part of the cart, the entry point to this is the queues. So when an item gets plonked onto the queue, there needs to be a workflow kicked off. And I say it's a workflow because you're looking at sort of static steps such as notifying the user that the items are being picked up by the warehouse. The request gets sent, the feedback from the warehouse when they ship it, the client, when it gets received, the information needs to get tracked back into the system. And of course, there's feedback and touch points in each of those steps. So I'm just sort of going to bundle this all into a single category and just highlight a few of the items that I think important. As I said, mostly sequential workflow type of process. So we'll look at a workflow type system, and AWS has SWS. Simple work, no, it's SWF, which is Simple Workflow Service. So that's an interesting one. And then, of course, Azure Logic apps that will pretty much perform this service for us. And both of them actually have pretty decent third-party connectivity, so they connect to third-party apps and services. And both of them also provide you the capability of extending that. So if there's a system or something that you want to integrate with and you don't have an out-of-the-box connector, you can just develop a function app or a Lambda to do it. And speaking of that, we obviously need to connect to our warehouse system and send through the information and extract the information. And luckily for us, we can use these serverless functions sort of as an anti-corruption layer and make the warehouse system part of this workflow. Then we also need to send out information. So as I mentioned, there's various channels that we need to communicate on to the client. You know, when the items get picked up, when they get shipped, the shipping information, all that kind of stuff. And in both services, so in AWS actually has an out-of-the-box service called SNS, Simple Notification Service, that will take care of sending emails and SMSs. Azure does not quite have a built-in service yet. That's GA. I saw Rory just now. He's going to pop up and yell at me. But they do have SendGrid service that you can use and spin up and obviously take care of this. And obviously we'll sort of do that, use that sort of service throughout the entire application. So we can sort of use a single notification or client interaction service if we want to. Okay, so the next up is your historic data that I mentioned is slowing down the system. And we've consumed the data, we've trained our models, we want to stash it somewhere cheaply and safely for potential future use. And there's a couple of options, and they're basically just different tiers or classes of storage systems. So your Azure has cool archive tiers in your blob storage, and AWS has your S3IA or infrequent access and Glacier class storage mechanisms. They both a lot cheaper than storing the full database and keeping the database active in a database server or service. Yeah, and at this stage, our central database is pretty much old news. So it's been absorbed through these services and made part of the microservice domains themselves. So we can make that a lot less prominent. Now, the next step is I'm going to look a bit broader and how we sort of expand our topology to bring everything together and make it apparent as or appear as a single cohesive application or service. And to do that, I'll add in a gateway. So this is an API gateway, AWS API gateway or Azure API management that actually provides us quite a bit of capability. So on top of this list of capability that these services offer is stuff like routing and versioning. So this means we can actually have multiple versions of the API running at the same time. And this gives us the capability of deploying at any time we want, and then simply routing the traffic from the old service to the new service, or routing it back to the old service when the new service goes belly up and causes problems. So this gives us a big step up in terms of agility in our deployments. Obviously, I can get rid of IIS because, well, most of these services are cloud accessible by nature. Then I want to slap on a global access point in the form of AWS Accelerator or Azure Front Door. This also gives us a lot of functionality or capability in terms of security, giving you regional point of access, traffic routing, as well as some caching. Now, I'm still going to add a CDN on top of this to, to carry on cluttering my pretty diagram here even further. And a lot of people would argue that you should be looking at something like Cloudflare for this, as opposed to your AWS CloudFront or your Azure CDN. I'm not going to brand it, but personally, I prefer Azure CDN over Cloudflare because Cloudflare tends to hijack your entire DNS, which I'm not too happy with. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day. Okay, so I've now taken all of this, and as I mentioned, the clutter and all my well-crafted, complex-looking animations, I just want to sort of summarize the topology a bit. So each of these mini services will leverage what it needs out of these pool of services to perform its job, to do what it needs to do. And it should not be as complicated as my previous slides may or may not be. As long as the interfaces between these services are well defined and maintained, you should be able to swap them out at each point of the service for something that is a better fit for your business, which introduces new functionality that you need all of a sudden, better feature capabilities, or even cost benefits to you. Okay, now I can't not talk about DevOps and automation. So here goes. We want to manage this whole environment. Okay, so we've got a lot of sort of building blocks, but we want this cohesive management around it. We want to quickly and easily deploy these fancy new features or critical bug fixes to production. And both AWS and Azure has their various development platforms as such. So AWS has what they call code services. So code commit, code build, code pipelines, and deploy. And their tag is host code, build, test, and deploy your applications to AWS. Azure, on the other hand, is not necessarily built in, but the service Azure Devops with boards, repos, pipelines. Their tagline is build, test, deploy with CI/CD that works with any language, platform, and cloud. So I'm obviously a bit biased there, so I'll leave those taglines to resonate with you. The difference here comes in how we talk to the provider and how we execute instructions to build up our resources. We're talking about sort of an infrastructure as code mindset, and both these services have got a very good CLI, command line interface, so you can start creating and building up those resources using and executing commands. Happiness. Templating type of approach. Next. Both of them offers, so AWS has CloudFormation and ARM templates in Azure. So we can actually then describe sort of the entire environment in a text JSON type, YAML type document, and then simply take this entire description and tell the provider there apply, and they will then go and spin it up, configure, or even reconfigure those services based on this template definition. So next is where things get a bit more interesting. So AWS has what they call a Cloud Development Kit or CDK, and this takes it almost to a next step where you can use a DSL or a domain specific language and actually code your environment. So using languages like C#, Node, Java, JavaScript. So you develop these resources in a DSL, you compile it, execute it, and it generates these templates for you that you can then go and apply. Now, on the AWS side, they decided that they're going to go and develop a whole new language for it. So there's something called Bicep, which was, I think it's available now recently in the last couple of weeks or so. They've got Bicep. There's third-party tools such as Pulumi, which actually talks to Azure, AWS, and or Google for you. That's quite nice. And there's also another, I think it's Farmer, which is a project for the Azure environment. But AWS, nice that they've got something sort of out of the box, easily accessible, and in a language that we understand. Okay, so I've stepped through taking this monolith and sort of dissecting it into smaller services, and I went through some of the services that I think would work in these scenarios. I was fairly selective of the services that I did evaluate. I realized that there's a large number of different services popping up on both platforms almost on a monthly basis, and there may be better scenarios or better services in some of these scenarios. The intent here was just to sort of give you the coverage of the basics and sort of show you and get you to think around the possibilities of reducing your workload, reducing your code, infrastructure dependencies. So, for example, I know on the Azure side, talking about these services popping up, Azure's recently released the Azure Communication Services that does SMS, Teams, and a bunch of other integrations and not send out emails. They also have static web apps, which would probably be a better option for your static applications, that kind of stuff. So, thank you for your patience, and I hope this was interesting. If it was, let me know. I'm always keen to talk about this stuff, and I'm more than happy to delve into some of these aspects a bit deeper. If there's anything you'd like to see or hear from me, I'm always looking for the next topic. So thank you for your time, and thank you for Ezra for giving me this platform.
Thank you, Neil. It was good, a lot in there. I think people hopefully enjoyed it. Are there any questions maybe for Neil? You can use the chat, or you can raise your hand maybe. I can unmute you. None at all. First question for Neil gets a prize. We've got some JetBrains prizes.
Oh, then you expect me to answer it though.
So while people are thinking of a question, I've got one question. I can't get the prize though. So Neil, just on moving from beginning diagram of a monolith to the final diagram with your microservices, when do you make that call of going to microservices? At what point? Should you always go there, or is there like a tip and scale that a monolith is still valid? Or
so yeah, that's a very good. I mean, you've always got I think good question. So you're looking for a tipping scale when a monolith still becomes valid. I think it's all about your business and what your business growth and business future is. So if your business is growing and you are actually making money off of this kind of stuff, that's where you focus. And those are the things that you need to start addressing and fixing if there are problems. I think the old monolith applications, I've seen a few that it's sitting there in the corner running, doing one job, and it does it great. Then obviously, no, you don't want to. But if you're an e-commerce shop, an Amazon or a Takealot or a Loot, you should be innovating. You should be trying to grab the business away from your competitors. And I think that is where you should be investing your money. And it all comes down to, is this easy to use from your client's point of view? The people that are paying your money, that's where you are making your money. And I think the tipping scale for that is when it starts becoming too expensive to make changes, then decisions need to be made.
Cool.
Thanks.
I think there are 2 questions. It looks like Lance has one and Billy asked one in the chat as well. Let me just read Billy's one out. I think that one came up first. So he's asking, instead of using AWS's Elasticsearch, couldn't you use Elasticsearch's cloud service directly? Would it be easier to set up?
I don't know, you tell me. It's outside of my cloud provider service talk, so I don't know. I mean, Elasticsearch in itself is fairly easy to set up if you're running it sort of in a VM or container yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, the reason is we're getting into this now, and I'm sort of toying because we've signed up for Elastic Cloud, and we are obviously on AWS as well. And the temptation is to actually use them separately but connect them. But I don't know when would be best to do that, and when would be best to use AWS's one. I have another question for after Lance though. If it's fine, I'm still researching, so I just thought I'd take a stab.
I can't tell. Use Azure Cognitive Search. There you go. Solved.
Hey guys, how are you? Hi guys.
Hey, Lance.
Hi.
Yes.
I just have one simple question. Regarding
Simple.
the monolith.
Okay.
Yeah, simple. So regarding the monolithic stuff, are you guys doing any resource tracking, or are you using any usable apps that can like basically get metadata for the monolith? Because I feel like everything already happens and it's too late.
So if you're looking at your App Insights, now I forgot the what's it, Cloudflare, I think. So App Insights, I can tell you, yes, definitely. App Insights is something that you can integrate into your current application and already start drawing metrics out of it relatively simply and relatively low overhead to do that. So that's the kind of thing that I would definitely look at, to draw metrics, to draw the information around what the application's doing and that kind of thing as it stands. You can integrate fairly quickly, and App Services has a free tier, so you can start playing with it almost immediately.
Oh, that's really cool. Okay, thanks, man. Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay.
I have one more question. Hopefully it's one more. So we're delving quite strongly into AWS and cloud-based stuff. We've come from a sort of monolithic place where all of our stuff was Laravel and PHP. Mm-hmm. And it's very awkward and weird making the transition, because you're so used to one way of thinking and you actually have to think very differently. And it's exciting. My question is this, we obviously want to become as proficient and expert at building solutions and cloud-based stuff as quickly as possible. The route that we're on as a business is we're putting a lot of time into the AWS training and things like serverless. What would your advice be in terms of getting everyone skilled up and learning and actually being able to do this and understand the architecture quite quickly, and making that mind shift in sort of from monolithic to, distributed and serverless? And then my second question is along the lines of, are there books that you'd recommend, or templates or design patterns or things that sort of give you a leg up if you're getting into this, to avoid the 5-year learn from experience route that you know, we don't want to walk along. Yeah, so those are my 2 questions. The best suggested training path with books and stuff, as well as, are there guidelines, are there templates, are there design patterns and good practices that we can learn quite quickly?
Okay, so to start off with, obviously my expertise lies in the Azure side of things, but the books, I'm not a very booky person. I've got a few books here, you know, like the real meta stuff, domain-driven design, application domain-driven design and patterns, that kind of stuff. And especially now, if you're looking at your cloud services, books become outdated very quickly. What I would recommend, highly recommend, is both AWS and Azure has sort of well-architected system overviews. So that's where I got a lot of my information. I literally looked at sort of the architecture I was looking for, found a architecture overview in the AWS Center or in Azure, and sort of compared the 2 of them. So if you know what your application is going to look like, there's probably a architecture with good practices, good patterns, good approaches on both of these providers that's available to you. So I highly recommend that. The Microsoft side, I'm not quite once again sure about the AWS side. The Microsoft has got Microsoft Learn, and they've got a crap load of learning overviews and that kind of stuff. And you can take, you know, from your juniors, let's look for it. Let's learn. You know, they've got paths that you can actually take. So if you want to do, you know, become certified, create an Azure account, get started with Power BI, that kind of stuff. There's a shitload of stuff here. I've pretty much spent my last 2 weeks in it because I'm now officially a certified Devops expert for Microsoft, and this is where I did most of my learning for that. Yeah. I mean, why is this not to everyone? There we go. To everyone. So on the Azure side, and once again, you're going to sit with different levels of people. I think if anything, look at the small chunks of functionality. I'd like to say containerization, because that is so easy to take an application and break it into a container and work with that container. And then you can just take that and go and push it into anything. If it's a AWS container instance or an Azure container instance or a Beanstalk or a, you know, Kubernetes cluster, it doesn't matter. It's a container. It'll run where you dump it, type of thing. And then you get the people that are actually interested in your ops and managing these services and setting up the security around them and the networks and proxies and all that kind of stuff. So different levels, start small. It's an application. If you can write an application, if you can break it down into a small chunk, it actually becomes even easier to cross-pollinate capability than giving a guy 200,000 line application that he needs to get up to speed with. So I don't know if that quite answered your question in sort of a long way around kind of way.
No, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
But definitely look at those architecture overviews and diagrams. That taught me a lot. It's just looking at, I've got an e-commerce site. What does a well-architected cloud native e-commerce site look like? And then don't go and take everything and try a big bang approach. Take small areas, take small services, break them out. I even had a discussion with a guy 2 weeks ago. You know, even look at your solid principles, create interfaces, and keep the monolith, but break out the services within the monolith so that you can then go and break it out process in future if you wanted to.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Neil, and thanks for all the questions. Billy, I think you can just send me a message and we'll get one of those JetBrains prizes over to you.
What? That's so cool. Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks for the questions. Questions, not just one question. You earned it. Yeah, so just wanted to find out how many people are new today. If you can just put your hands up or some sort of way.
About to present. No.
Let's see, one person.
Turn the light on.
Two people.
No, it's tomorrow.
3 people.
3 people. Okay, so yeah, glad you could join us for this, our last Dev user group meetup for this year. Yeah, Enrique, would you like to say anything else, or should we go straight over to André?
We can go ahead.
Okay, cool. André, take it away.
Great, thank you very much. Hold on, need to do this in the right order now. Share. Okay, it's my screen sharing. Can I proceed?
100%.
Great. So thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is André Odendaal. I am a AppFactory mentor at Microsoft. The AppFactory is an internship program for aspiring software developers. This is actually a talk I gave to all our partners, interns, about preparing their CV because it's coming to the end of the year and because a lot of them are completing their internship. And I felt it was also valuable for the community, the developer community, because I'm sure a lot of you are, or some of you are thinking about what's happened this year, thinking about maybe changing jobs in the new year. This talk is primarily focused on school leavers and people just entering the industry or junior developers, but hopefully senior people can also be reminded of the importance of a good CV. So if I click here, where did I go? There. So why do you need a CV? The important thing to understand is the CV gets you the interview, and the interview gets you the job. So a good CV doesn't guarantee you a job. Importantly, it provides talking points for the interviewer. So when they are interviewing you, they can look at your CV and they can say, this is something about you. I can ask questions about you. I can get an understanding about what kind of person you are. Because in an interview, besides your technical ability, they're also trying to understand whether you will fit into the team that you're going to work with. And that's what we call a culture fit. And so we need to understand what type of person you are. Which is difficult to get just from looking at code or doing a technical test. The important thing about a CV is that when they have a job application, there really can be hundreds of people applying. And while a good CV won't guarantee that you'll get the interview, a bad CV will definitely get it thrown away. Just because there are so many people applying and there's only so much time for people to interview people, they're looking for any excuse to throw away a CV. Now, Ezra said, I've got to talk about the perfect CV, and the reality is there is no such thing as a perfect CV. But what you can ensure is that the content you have is perfect. That all the content you got is accurate, that it's neat, that it's approachable, and is what the person's looking for. When I mentioned that I was going to be giving a talk, this first talk, I got feedback. Why is it bouncing twice? When I first gave the talk, mentioned that I was giving this talk, I got this feedback saying, please drill into these people to get their shit proofread. It shows you care. When I get CVs or portfolios with typos or bad spelling everywhere, it's pretty much going in the bin. And I've seen this as well when I get CVs of people applying to the AppFactory, or just people who can't even get their own name spelled correctly. And it's just disgusting to read. And if you're not going to put effort into your CV, why should I put effort into interviewing you and taking you into my company? So the sections of a CV are not complicated. There's a contact me section. This is the first and most important part of a CV. You'd be surprised where people leave their email address out of their CV. And I hear the assumption, oh, but I emailed it to you. Yes, but I might have emailed that onto someone else to review, to do the interview or to do the research. Or you might have sent it to info@company.com. That doesn't necessarily mean that I would have your contact information. So please give me your contact information. Give me the ability to contact you. Then we want to spend time on about me. I want to understand about who you are, not just your technical ability, but what makes you tick, what makes you a well-rounded character. And then finally, we want to understand your work history and your education history. You understand here that there's nothing information here about technical ability, because companies will do tests and assessments and things like that to focus on whether you understand the technologies that they want to use in their company. So we need to, they will do that, but this company, the CV needs to explain who you are. So in the contact me, first things first, your name, and put your first name first. This might sound strange, but I'm seeing a lot in schools and with Black South Africans, that they're putting their last name or their tribal name first, because there is a tendency to want to emphasize where you're from, and that's great. However, a lot of people in management positions are still new to African names and are not sure which is a surname and which is a first name. And they're going to make the assumption that the first name they see is your actual name. So my name's André Odendaal, and to someone who doesn't speak English or understand Western names, that if I said my name is Odendaal André, you wouldn't know that there's a difference. It's the same thing as Bond, James Bond. Okay, Mr. Okay, Bond. Hi, I want to interview Bond, last name James. There's that thing there. So please put your first name first. Then, and your first name, sorry, before I carry on, your first name needs to be your legal name on your ID document. So if your name is Indivo, but you tell everyone your name is Gift, it's going to cause confusion when people want to have your ID number or have documentation about you, and there's conflict of these two people. For Indivo, got Gift, how do I know that these are the same people? So please then put your first legal name first, then in quotes, put your preferred name. So if you prefer to be called Gift or Precious or whatever your Christian name or your English name is, put that in quotes, and then finally your last name. Then again, contact me, email address, phone number. Give me your physical address. Let me know where you are. There's no point in me trying to interview you or trying to contact you if you're applying and you live in Johannesburg, but I'm based in Cape Town. Finally, give me your date of birth and your ID number. This allows me to understand how old you are, and whether from the ID number, I can understand whether you're a South African citizen, because I need to know for triple BEE purposes whether I can hire you. And the ID number doesn't give me that information, but it helps me understand. Finally, your marital status. And I only use marital status if you are married or if you have dependents. This just gives an understanding that because the default is that you're single, I think especially in the IT industry, or you have a girlfriend or something like that, but it's not important. But it's important if you have dependents to share that information. So just as a bit of example, here's a snapshot from my CV. You can see there, big André William Odendaal. I've then put their Master of Engineering because that's something I'm very proud of. I've put some links in, and we'll talk about that in the next section about me, but I like putting those links at the top so people can go and find out more information about me. And then I've got my email address, my mobile number, physical address, date of birth, ID number, my marital status. So not complicated, but really, this is the first thing. Like if you can't get this right, people are going to throw your CV away. Then we talk about the About Me section, and this is a part I find a lot of people struggle with. And I think it really makes a difference to have a good About Me section so people can understand what you are. Understand if I've got, even if I've got 50 applicants, how do I differentiate between them without interviewing them? Give me something that says, hey, this is someone worth interviewing. So first off, have your LinkedIn URL. This is Facebook for professionals. Recruiters expect it. Everyone expects it. It's how people are going to, and people do use it to go look up their candidates before they interview you. Because you're in the IT industry, have a GitHub URL or similar CodePen or something like that. Show your work. This is like an artist portfolio. If I was going to hire an artist, I'd want to say, well, can I see examples of your work? And the same thing for being a software developer. I want to see examples of work. I want to see your clean code. And the projects there are not really, what type of projects there are not really important. It's just code that you've written and that I can see, yes, Danny actually code. You know, this is kind of just in addition to an assessment that you might take. And finally, the testimonial. Please don't say that you're a responsible team player, passionate, hard worker, because as an employer, I expect everyone to have those qualities. I expect everyone who works for me to be responsible to some degree, and not to steal from me, or to be on time and to do the work that I've actually given them to do and things like that. I expect you to be a team player. I expect you to get on with the colleagues in your team. I'm going to fire you if you fight with your coworkers or you're mean to them. So again, I expect you to at least pretend to be, get along with your team. Passionate. I do expect you to kind of put some effort into the work. If you're doing the bare minimum, you're not going to succeed at any company. They're going to sideline you. They're going to find ways of getting rid of you. So again, you don't have to be passionate, but at least you have to pretend to be enthusiastic about the work. And finally, a hard worker. I expect everyone in my team, all my employees, to be hard workers. So putting that information really doesn't add anything about you. I expect you already to have these kinds of qualities. What I do want you to talk about are your hobbies. Tell me what you do for fun, what you do about yourself. What's your growth like? What studies do you do? Are you a continual learner? Are you continuing to study? I've been in this industry for 20 odd years, and I'm still having to learn now, about recently it was about cloud. Now I'm getting into machine learning, and now just recently I've picked up a book, Schrodinger's killer app about quantum computing. Talk about your dreams, especially if you're a junior developer. What kind of work do you want to do? I want to be a web developer. I want to be a mobile developer. I'd like to be a team lead. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do with your life? Again, I'm not saying that you want to be a unicorn warrior or something like that, but keep it realistic to the type of work that you'd like to do. Finally, be a well-rounded character. Now, this kind of comes from a writing thing I put there from Google. Well-rounded characters have weaknesses, strengths, flaws, fears, tastes, and dreams. Now, we're not going to focus on the weaknesses and flaws in your CV, but I want to see your strengths. I want to see your tastes. I want to see your dreams. What are you good at? And this doesn't necessarily have to be work-related, as I'll show you some examples. But well-rounded characters are dynamic and growing. Their CV in a year's time or 2 years' time is going to be vastly improved and vastly added to from a year previously. Finally, keep it short to the point. Don't write an essay. Just give the key points. So here's an example from my CV. And I've just highlighted kind of the keywords for you to see. I'm a hobbyist game developer. What does that tell you about me? Just already in those first words. Well, I'm writing code in my spare time. So even if I'm not a great software developer, I'm continually working on it. I have won various awards. Okay, so something I've done in my personal life actually, has achieved something. I've completed my master's degree in software engineering. So again, even if it's just, you know, I completed my matric at X school, whatever it is, just something that you know, where's your studies? One of the things I'm proud of is that I wrote a research paper. So again, not just did I study, but I went above and beyond. And then other things that I do, I present talks on technologies like I'm doing today. Finally, and this is a good example of things that I do outside my work life that can show my skills in for a future employer, is that I'm the chairman of my my complex's body corporate. If I told you I'm a chairman of a body corporate, what does that mean? It means this guy probably has some responsibilities and takes it seriously. And since I've said there since 2015, I've been there for a while. So by having a life outside of work, I can, you know, show how I can add value to the company. So think about yourself, and you know, I really get upset when I chat to my interns and I say, what do you do? And they say nothing. And I go, what do you mean nothing? You get home and you sit on your bed and stare at the ceiling until it's time to come home? No, they say. Oh, what did you do? Nothing. Or I ask them, hey, how was your weekend? It was okay. What did you do? Nothing. Again, did you go home, sit on your bed, stare at the ceiling? No. Did you do something? Yes. What? Nothing. Come on, guys. I know it's tough. I know you can be exhausted, but you need to have a life outside of work, and you need to have some kind of interest, ideally a hobby, that you can, you know, grow as a person and develop. Then we get to the, I would actually say, the least interesting part, the education and work history. First, you show the work history. This just needs to be the company that you work for, the job title as its space in the contract. So please don't say that you're, you know, the #1 superstar at the company if your job was junior developer or just developer. Have the start date and end date, and then please add a sentence or two about your role. Mention the projects, the languages, and frameworks as keywords, so that if I'm reading a CV, I can see, oh, he worked at this company. Oh, he was working in .NET, or oh, he was working in microservices. Those are things that can help, you know, help me evaluate whether you've got the skills required, but not just that, things I can ask you about. Tell me about your time working on microservices. Then your education history. People tend to care less about your history as you grow. I mean, it's really terrible as a young person. Everyone pushes you and pressures you to get a matric, and as soon as you get the matric, it's worthless. People are like, oh, you got a matric, great. What else have you got? Nothing. Oh, well, then you got nothing. But it is important, and you need to continue to develop that. Please do not talk about languages or frameworks unless you're prepared to talk about it in detail. Often I see interns or people applying, they're straight out of varsity and they say, oh, the programming languages I know are C++, Java, C#, Ruby, Python, HTML, CSS, PHP. And then I ask them, okay, what's your stuff about, what do you know about C++? No, I only spent a week, we spent a week talking about it in class. Well, then you don't really know the language, do you? We can't even have a discussion. And that's what you want to have, is you want to have the interview must be a discussion about who you are and how you're going to fit into the company, not a discussion about can you do the work or not. Here's an example I've got, again, from my CV, and I've just highlighted the keywords. So I've said here I was a lead developer using Visual Studio 2013, which gives you an idea of when I had this job. Develop an enterprise application for agricultural industry using C#, .NET 4.5, SQL 2012. The front-end uses Windows Forms, click once, communicated with using WCF services. The web portal is ASP.NET. I was using JavaScript and working with CRM, Microsoft CRM. So put those things in to elaborate information about yourself. Are there any questions I've got? One thing I haven't mentioned is frameworks or matrices where people have lists of languages and how good they know it, and those are garbage because they mean nothing. the scales of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. Like, what does 5 mean? And when you say it's excellent, what does that? Your excellent the same as my excellent, and 1 is that weak. Maybe your weak is my strong, because my opinion, and especially your opinion of yourself, can be different to what people actually think of you. And I think software developers tend to suffer from imposter syndrome, where they tend to underrate their abilities when actually they can do the job quite well. Or the reverse, where people overrate their abilities and actually they're, quite frankly, talking bullshit. Are there any questions? Are there any hands up? Enrico, Ezra, can you give me an indication?
A question just came through from Ranesh. How should one go about mentoring or mentioning disabilities?
I think you should put that in your about me. So again, I would say here, the fact that I am, and I have no idea. I haven't thought about how that would apply. But I would then in my about me say that I have a disability, and mention. Don't just say that you're disabled. Please try and, without being too long, give an indication of the degree of disability, if that makes sense. Because I think there's a difference between I've got a limp to, I'm wheelchair bound and need special access. And I think it can be incredibly scary to share that information for fear of being rejected straight away. But at least in my experience, and when I've talked to recruiters and I've talked to other companies about hiring, they're very pro looking for disabled people and accommodating. So I'd like to think that the world has changed. I'm pretty sure people can give me examples where they were rejected for their disability. But I think you have to be honest with that information. I don't think you can hide that until the last minute. Are there some other questions?
Yeah, the next question is from Perry. Is there a limit on how long a CV can be?
Yes. Ideally, your CV should be 1 page, because I haven't got time. People don't have time to read pages and pages of a CV. You want to be clean and neat, and I've got some other examples I'm going to show you. In fact, let me go to them. Now. So you're gonna have to just excuse I've redacted. I didn't take out his surname in that space. You want a nice and clean CV. Obviously, as you grow as a developer, or not as you grow, as you spend more and more time in the workplace, your CV does tend to get longer. But really, and this is why kind of the sections need to be as concise as possible. Without being cluttered, I've had to receive a CV that was just wall-to-wall text, and that also kind of drove me off because I just wasn't prepared to sit and read through the CV. But isolating the key points that I can pick up, yes, this is something important. Are important. Even going so far as when you have your experience and you've worked for 10 companies, maybe only show the last 3, and then add a line saying, for more information, contact me, so that I can see what you've been doing in the last couple of years. Because how relevant, let's assume I'm 40 now, well, nearly 40 now. How relevant is my work I did in the year 2000? When in 2000, I was working on Visual Basic 6, working with ASP pages. JavaScript was to be avoided at all costs. It was slow. Is that relevant now? I couldn't help you with Visual Basic problem. I couldn't help you with the Visual Basic problem. So I feel that that's something I could remove from my CV. Again, I could put that on my LinkedIn profile for completeness, and again, I could put a line saying, just if you for more details, for more work experience, ask me. And then if they want to interview me, they want to know more me, or in the interview they can say, give me your work history. I can say, well, actually, I started here, I started there. Before that 2000, that was when I was a software developer, but I mean, before then I was a technician at the CSIR, working at the Satellite Application Center. So I was working on wires and things like that, but it's just not relevant now, 20 years later. So short, concise CVs. Does that answer your question, Pierre? JJ asks, why should I include my ID number in my CV? Isn't that a security risk? Yes, it can be a security risk. If you don't feel confident with it, please leave it out. It tends to be the first thing people ask for anyway, so I also don't feel bad putting that out there. It's up to you. I'm really not worried about that. The next question is, will the slides and recordings be shared? I will definitely be uploading my slides onto my LinkedIn profile. Great. So if we look at Nabil's, this is one of my interns. And you can see at the top here, he's got his LinkedIn profile. Again, kind of nice at the top, information about him, his phone number, his contact number, physical address, LinkedIn profile, Hub, GitHub profile, CodePen profile. And I love his motivation. He says, I'm a hobbyist photographer and graphic artist. So this is something that who he is, someone who's interested in photography, interested in the aesthetics of something I can talk about. He loves learning new technologies, especially web, UI, and UX. Now, I would say normally don't say that you love learning new technologies, but here he's specifying that he's interested in web. So these are the kind of things he wants to do. If I was saying, listen, I'm looking for a backend developer, I could then say, well, are you sure you want this position? Then he's telling me he studied at the University of Pretoria, and he was also the chairperson of the Muslim Students Association. So firstly, he's a Muslim. Okay, that's something to take into consideration. And he was a chairperson, which again shows that he's got some kind of responsibility role. He's had some kind of responsibility role. You want to demonstrate the qualities of responsibility. What were the other things? You want to demonstrate the qualities of responsible team player, passionate and hard worker through your experience, not just tell me that you are those things. Here's another one from Madiboke. Again, LinkedIn profile, ID number, address, telephone number. Here, I'm an amateur singer who loves to watch romantic comedies. Again, this isn't great information. That doesn't necessarily help, but it's a talking point I can ask you. Oh, what was the last movie you read? What kind of songs do you sing? She says here, she said this one at University of Technology where I was part of a choir. Oh, well, there's the team player part. She's demonstrating that team player part. CVs can have different shapes and formats. This André said that he's a family-oriented guy that loves helping others to succeed. I teach programming as well as Microsoft Office to people in my community. Yeah, so he's a community guy. He cares about that stuff. I've just started attending programming community meetups. So he's like this community here, and I'm currently working on a BODMAS calculator for primary school learners using. Oh, he's got a bit of IoT information there, and then here again some links talking about his work experience, telling me that he's mobile first web application using Angular, Bootstrap. See these keywords coming up here. This is our last one. France, again, software developer, some links, again, easy identifiable information. I volunteer in youth activities like church camp mentor. So this there, just the bare bones basics. Oh, okay, you volunteer. Okay, again, mentor, a little bit of leadership, a little bit of stuff like that. It's something I can also. Oh, which church do you go to? What kind of church camps? What are the church camps like? Things I can actually now talk to you as a human being to a human being, not just, oh, are you a worker? I enjoy creating personal software projects. See GitHub profile. Okay, so I've been linked now back to his profile again. So CVs can change. Like I said, there's no right or wrong answer, but what you want to do is you want to give me contact information, give me a reason to interview you, which is more than just your technical ability. I want to see that you're a well-rounded character, that you're someone who has a life outside of work, that you're passionate about things. Again, demonstrate through your out of work activities, responsibility, teamwork, passionate, hard worker, all those things. So those are the CVs. I want to quickly talk about LinkedIn profile. Please, for your LinkedIn profile, put a picture in. Ideally, just your head and shoulders, and a color, ideally with a blank background, so I can see, see who you are. It really just makes a statement that this is someone who's actually spent a little bit of time on their CV. Put your job description there. Job description at Microsoft or whatever it is. I see people put other bits and pieces there, which is fine, but the more relatable, remember this is a professional site, so I want to see that. And then put the stuff that you've had in your CV that we've discussed, your testimonial, the keywords about your job description. Please put that in your LinkedIn profile. Recruiters, other people really do use LinkedIn to what's the word? Stalk potential employees. And if you then don't have your CV on you, you can always say, hey, go check my LinkedIn profile because everything's there. Then on your GitHub profile, again, put a picture there of yourself, ideally in color. I've put a fun one there because I'm drinking a mug of coffee, but you can see my face takes up most of the page. Put your real name in. I know that this is your personal space, and so maybe you want to put in Power Unicorn or, Dragon Ball Z Warrior, something there, but this is something that people are going to be looking at. So put your name, your real name there. Put a brief description. It doesn't have to be a full motivation. Just tell me a little bit about yourself. You put in your contact information and other information, brief information. It doesn't have to be a lot. Just put in some key points. Finally, pin some repositories, the repositories you're proud of, because otherwise you're just going to see the latest ones, which might not be the best. So if you've got repositories that you're proud of, pin them so that these are the ones I'm more likely to click on to go see information about you. That's the end of my talk. Again, I hope it's some value for someone somewhere. And a reminder for more seasoned developers of the things that are important in looking for when building a CV and looking for work elsewhere. Thank you. Any questions? Great, guys. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you.
No questions whatsoever. I guess we're coming basically to the end of it. Thanks, André. It was great listening. I think my CV is way too long because all I do is every time I get more experience, I just dump it on my CV and carry on with life.
You really need to think about sparing the person who's having to read your CV of reading it.
Yeah. I guess you just scan through it, and if it looks too long or too technical or too much information,
there's just no need. And again, if you think about, like, even if you've spent 5 years and you've had 5 jobs, the first can you remember what you were doing 5 years ago? Do you think the work you were doing would be relevant in a discussion of a job you were going for the future? What technologies were we working on 5 years ago? Could you speak and be an expert in them? Sometimes the answer is yes, in which case it's great. And I would even say that if you want to keep your history, don't then put the descriptions. Just put, I worked at X company from this date to this date. Don't describe it, because again, the description is not relevant. It doesn't help us. Like, for example, for me to say, 15 years ago, I worked on .NET 2.0. I couldn't tell you what's in .NET 2.0. And I think if you gave me a .NET 2.0 project, I'd really struggle. When I was working on Windows 2000 or XP, I think, at the time, it's just, it's just not relevant anymore for a job I want to find tomorrow. So either omit it or just, again, brief it. But what is important, obviously, is what you're currently doing. That's really important. Put that information in. Use the keywords there. What technologies are you working on? Even if they're not relevant to the job you're looking for, their skills, there's something that a company might say, hey, okay, cool, this is something that the guy's got, maybe that's a technology we're interested in, or it's a related technology that we feel we can use.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Cool. Yeah, do we want to give away one more JetBrains prize before people leave?
I see a whole bunch of people that have already.
Yeah, quite a few of them missed out.
I've got a question. What is the order of your names you should use?
I see Lance with a finger up.
Your first name.
Yes, and what's the rest? And what's the rest of it? I said, what's the order?
Your first name followed by your surname.
Oh, so close.
Come on. Okay, but I did remember that you're not supposed to put like your other name like Gift, or you're not supposed to put Gift or maybe your traditional name. And yeah, it should be what
Should
your
be
full name.
it should be your first name that's on your document, then your preferred name. So if you want to use your traditional name, then have your preferred name there, and then finally your last name. So well done, you've got a license. Well done, you've won a prize.
According to Billy.
Yeah.
And then I see Perry also has it.
There we go.
Okay, awesome. I'm really excited. Thanks. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Lance, just private message me, send me your details.
Cool.
Oh,
And Perry also.
Yeah?
Like email address, just so we can send you a license.
Oh, fantastic! I wasn't expecting it, but yeah, no, you made my day. Thanks, guys.
Cool. And then Perry also just send through your details to Ezra privately for a license as well.
Great.
Okay.
Right, cool. I guess, yeah, that we could end it over here. You all should be quite tired. It's now 7:45. Thanks for coming through. And remember, the Geek of 2020 is on the 9th of December. Just check Meetup for information about that. I'll put the link down as well. Although a lot of people have left without that link already. But yeah, have a look at that. There will be more prizes. There will be cool prizes. Quiz, lots of things going on. And I guess that's the end of our meetup. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thanks, Neil. Thanks, André.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.